Hey friends, and welcome back to my Chizity channel. And today, in honor of Black History Month, I will be telling an account of something that happened long before I was born, but it's very important to the African American history and culture, and definitely is a story that needs to be told. So this story I will be telling today is the story of the Port Chicago 50. Now, I know you probably never heard of it, don't know what that is. So today I'm going to definitely break it down for you and explain what happened and why this is so significant even for today and just in general. So without further ado, let's get to the history. So, on July 17th, 1944, at the Port Chicago Naval Magazine, 30 miles east of Oakland, California, set in San Francisco, California. Shortly after 10:18 p.m., a deadly explosion went off that killed 320 African American men and left 390 injured. The two ships, the Quinault Victory and the E.A. Bryan, were destroyed, as well as the dock that they were docked with and the town itself. This was the worst war-related disaster in U.S. history. In the end of all this, 50 sailors were charged with mutiny, lengthy prison sentences for refusing to return to the deplorable conditions that they faced after the explosion happened. They worked a whole year without leave. They all received less than honorable discharges after the military, and they all received no veterans benefits after they left the military. For the rest of the men that survived, they were left with jagged nerves, sore joints, and a lot of distrust in the military. That is the shorter version of what happened. Now to go into detail of the accounts of the men that were there. This article that I am referencing from was written in 1998. Now I'm sure that majority of these sailors and men are long gone, but if they are still alive, I'm happy that they're still alive. But this is from an account from 1998, just so you guys know. So a story from one of the sailors that was on the ship that night. Seaman First Class Robert Ruth, he was on the ship that night. And also Seaman First Class Joseph Small was also on the ship that night, and these are their accounts. The first two explosions ripped open through the night shortly after 10:18 p.m. Quote, "It was the biggest and the brightest 4th of July coloration you've ever seen," says Ruth, now 66. He was blinded by a flying piece of glass. Quote, "The explosion lifted me and my mattress off the bunk. I unconsciously gripped the edge of the mattress. I landed on the floor with the mattress on top of me. A lot of the falling glass was caught by the mattress. Had the mattress not been on top of me, I would have been butchered had it not fallen." Allen, who wrote a book on the Port Chicago 50 and just the mutiny itself, writes that it was the world as it was, and it was pretty grim. These guys were victims of racism and military legal system. They were railroaded into jail. There was no mutiny. It was simply a wildcat strike. Smalls again, 69 of Somerset, New Jersey, and he says how the working conditions were just for them working. He says, "We were just shown a boxcar full of ammunition, wire nets spread out on the docks and the hole in the ship and told to load. Our greatest beef was that we were given no instructions. No one talked about the dangers we believe existed, and we were given green right out of boot camp." Now, in the ship's underbelly, or the hole, or whatever you guys want to call it, the underneath the ship that stores all these big items, it's hot down there, it's sticky. Now, being these men, their job was to roll and lift these heavy things, 8-foot shells that were to go onto battleships, 2-ton bombs that were filled. That's what they had to lift and roll into the hull of the ship every day. That's hard manual labor. They didn't have any machines to help them, nothing. It was just these men doing this every day, and that was the crappy job that they were given. There were no safety rules, no safety instructions. They weren't given any instructions. They weren't even told how to do their job. They just showed them the ammunition and said, put that ammunition onto that ship. and that was all they were given. Had they had been correctly instructed and treated fairly, 320 men would have been able to live their full lives. But instead, 320 lives were taken, and another 50 lives were also taken for standing up for just being able to protect themselves and make sure that this won't happen again. So I'm going to take account from another Port Chicago 50. His name is Freddie Meeks, and he was 71 at this time of this interview. He says, sometimes you wouldn't catch them because they were coming down too fast and they would hit together. They would make a big noise and scare you to death. He also says, I believe if we had been white, they would have given us some instructions on how to handle ammunition safely. That's taken from Smalls in the interview, who was accused of leading the mutiny. This part of the video, I'm taking quotes that they said, stuff that they actually said in this interview of what happened to them. This is all their accounts of people that were actually there at the time of the explosion. So according to Allen's book, who wrote a book on the Port Chicago 50 and the mutiny, he quoted a white officer saying, the colored enlisted personnel are neither temperamentally, intellectually capable of handling high explosives. This article also says that surviving black sailors mourning the death of comrades were stung by fear and frustration after the 30 days of leave the white sailors received. Hey, sorry guys, my camera died and I really don't know where I left off, but I know I left off of accounts from the men that were actually there, so I'm going to continue off of that. This is from Percy Robinson, who at the time of this interview, he was 66, and he's a retired engineer who lived in Los Angeles. And he was quoted saying, I thought we were treated pretty unfairly. He said, and he was also a seaman first class at the time. He also said, my face was mutilated. When you passed the mirrors, the skin was hanging off your face and you couldn't recognize yourself. After you were wounded, you were supposed to go home for leave. After we were wounded, they made us go back to work. That's why I struck. So this is Smalls, the first seaman that I talked about. This is Smalls' account of the day where they were actually told to go back to work, and where they basically refused to go back. So at the end of the street was a podium, he recalls. Right was toward the parade grounds, left was toward the docks. When the lieutenant said, column left, everybody stopped dead in his tracks. He called me up front. He said, Small, are you going to work? I said, no, sir. When I said no, sir, somebody in the ranks behind me said, if Small doesn't go, we're not going. On that day, it was 258 men that refused to work, and they were all put in jail for 3 days for not wanting to work. So it says Rear Admiral Carlton H. Wright, he said, if you don't go back to work, you'll be charged with mutiny, and mutiny is punishable by death by firing squad. Robinson, who was among those who backed down, he asked us again, will you go back to work? Everybody said yes, except 50 guys. Freddie Meeks, he says, that didn't turn the 50 sailors, Meeks says. When it came time to decide, they said, those who want to go to work, step to the left. And those who do not want to work, step to the right. So we stepped to the right. We said, if we're going to be shot, we'll be shot. We were not going back to those conditions. I wouldn't call that mutiny. It was just a refusal to load ammunition. Now, this is from a person named Marshall. I don't know if I've already said his name before earlier. But this is another person's account. And this is during the trial when they've already been arrested, already been charged with mutiny. And he says, this is not 50 men on trial for mutiny. This is the Navy on trial for its vicious policy towards Negroes. Negroes are not afraid of anything any more than anyone else. Negroes in the Navy don't mind loading ammunition. They just want to know, why are they the only ones loading? They want to know why they are segregated and why they don't get promoted. So it says on October 24th, the Navy Trial Board, after only 8 minutes of deliberation, declared the Port Chicago 50 guilty of mutiny. Their sentences all ranged from 8 years to 15 years in prison. The sailors also were busted to the lowest rank, seaman apprentice. Small says, I considered myself blessed. He received a 15-year sentence. He said, I could have been sentenced to death. Now, years later, after they served, not all of them served full prison sentences. They got out probably in half the time, if not less. and they all got out. Some of them stayed more. Majority of them were released. Now, at this time, only a handful were accounted for to still be alive, and this was in 1998, so now it's probably a slim chance. It says many of them have made their peace with it and tried to forget it. Alan says, who wrote the Port 50 book. Others are still traumatized by the experience. They still feel ashamed. Most remain silent. I kept all those things inside of me, Freddie Meeks says. I didn't want to hurt my family. We were supposed to be bad people. People would turn their thumbs down on you. I was pretty bitter about that. Meeks also wanted to put on the record, he says, I hope that all of America knows about it. He says, it's something that's been in the closet for so long. So I definitely will include pictures of what the dog looked like after the explosion. If I can find pictures of the men, it's actually really hard to find pictures of them because not only are they gone, but searching the internet just for men that might have the same name as other men in the military now, it's kind of really hard. So I don't know if I'll be able to search any pictures of them, but definitely pictures of the explosion and how it looked after. So this was the Port Chicago 50. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. My opinion on this, I feel like obviously it was wrong. They were segregated. They joined the military to make better lives so their family could be proud of them, and instead they were put to work towards their death. 320 men died. That could have been prevented had it not been segregated, had they would have been treated fairly and given equal rights even in the military. 320 men could have lived the rest of their lives. Not only that, another 50 were put into prison and charged with something so stupid because they didn't want to go back to work in unsafe dang. Sorry. Because they didn't want to go back to work in unsafe, deplorable working conditions. They weren't safe. They were still gonna load 2-ton bombs, 8-foot shells. They were still gonna load those things, and it could happen all over again for them to die, and they just didn't care. So for those 50 men that stood up for themselves and that said they were not going back to work in those conditions, I applaud you to the fullest. They did and endured so much for so little. They didn't want to go back to work, so they got prison sentences. They got benefits taken away. They got deranked for not wanting to go back to work in unsafe conditions that the military supplied to them. I really am proud of those 50 guys, and I'm just really am proud. I'm proud to be a part of this culture. I'm a proud mixed African American. I'm proud because God only knows if men these days were going to be able to do that, to stand up for themselves, to really stand up for themselves, to go to prison for not wanting to work. I am proud. To the Port Chicago 50, you have done justice and you have made history, and you have definitely brought us a far long way, because the following year in 1945 they desegregated the military. So thanks to them, they definitely aided in that help, and the military after that was no longer segregated. And yeah, I just want you guys to know this story. This is really part of history. This is something that happened. People were affected by it, and I hope you guys understand and just know that always stand up for what you believe in. Even if at the moment it doesn't, you might not know why, just make sure you stand up for what you believe in. And if someone's treating you wrong, make sure they know. And if they don't understand or don't care, make them care. Do whatever you have to do to make sure that everyone is being treated equal and being treated fairly and being treated right. If you see something wrong, if you can in your power, make sure to correct it, Yeah, I hope you guys just give this a thumbs up. Share it with people, inform people, they haven't seen the video. Make sure you tell them to come watch my video all this month, because I'll be showing and definitely telling tales of brave men and women in African American history. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will see you, my friends, in my next video. So bye, friends.